The second round of fantasy football drafts this year is absolutely disgusting. I think everybody in that round, besides the running backs, quite honestly, is just being drafted at their absolute ceiling. So I wanted to make a video and kind of go through the positives and negatives that I see in all those players. So let's see. I got a tight end on here and 5 wide receivers that typically go in this round that I think are being overvalued and overdrafted for the most part. But you have to draft them unless you're able to get the running back. So let's dive into this. I want to talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. first. He goes as in redraft formats the wide receiver 9, the second pick of round number 2. Now, my problem with this is some of the best rookie wide receiver fantasy seasons in recent memory, the past decade or so, the ones that I looked up, Jamar Chase in 2021, he was the wide receiver 5. Odell Beckham in 2014, he was the wide receiver 7. Puka last year, he was the wide receiver 4, and Justin Jefferson was the wide receiver 6. So for Harrison to be going as the wide receiver 9, he really has to have, like a top 5-esque rookie fantasy season in probably since 2000 or so, to return this value. And once again, I'm not saying he can't do it, and I'll explain myself with the rest of these picks, but all of these guys, and obviously Marvin Harrison Jr., I think they have more chance of not returning value than hitting their ceilings. So that is the downside. Obviously, Marvin Harrison, he's paired up with Kyler Murray, who's a great quarterback, supported DeAndre Hopkins for a couple of seasons. It's really should be Kyler's first elite quarterback since D-Hop. Underrated offense as well. He should be the number 1 target earner in this offense. Rest in peace to Trey McBride, destroying the targets in this offense. But, he obviously, I think, as weird as it sounds to say for being a rookie, I think he's a very, very safe floor. He's not going to be, I would be very surprised if he was outside the top 18 or 20 wide receivers, barring injury. So I do think he's a safe option, but he's also if you're drafting him here, I think there's a better chance that he finishes 10 wide receiver spots lower than hitting the ceiling. So the second guy is Davante Adams. Now I've been very vocal about this. I don't like Davante Adams for this season. I think he's one of the easiest avoids in fantasy right now. He goes as the wide receiver 10, 205, so fifth pick in the second round. So he's being drafted exactly where he finished last year as the wide receiver 10, but he was the wide receiver 15 in points per game. Now, some of the negatives that I don't like about Davante Adams, he's aging. He's turning 32 this season. He's slowing down in efficiency metrics, yards per route run, yards per target. All of them have steadily been taking a dip since his last elite season with Aaron Rodgers. So along with that, everyone's kind of gassing up this quarterback upgrade for Gardner Minshew. Now, I'm a Colts fan. Are you really hyping up a wide receiver because he went from Aiden O'Connell to Gardner Minshew? And I don't even think that's a true given. Minshew could go out and be pretty below average for 5 or 6 games, and we're back to Aiden O'Connell. I just do not think the quarterback plays there, especially when all of these other guys in round 2, literally all of them, have a good quarterback. The next worst quarterback is Chris Olave having Derek Carr, who is far better than Davante Adams' options. Well, I mean, we saw Derek Carr give Davante Adams a great year in 2022. Another thing, added target competition. Brock Bowers, whether you like it or not, that isn't a good thing for Davante Adams because a lot of people like to say, towards the end of the season they started saying, fuck it, chuck it to Davante Adams, just make the whole game plan Davante Adams. Brock Bowers will be involved. He also only had 4 top 12 finishes last season. It's the same amount as Jacoby Myers. That seems a little bit rich. You're going to have to spend the 15th overall pick, 17th overall pick on a guy that had 4 wide receiver 1 finishes. That's absolutely disgusting. Like, well, I just don't. I said at the beginning of the video that I want to talk about the positives and the negatives, but this is going to be mostly negatives for all these guys. Just because for the most part, I do my best to avoid them. Honestly, the only 2 in this list that I'm going to talk about that I do draft a little bit of is Drake London, Chris Olave, and I'll talk about them. But Marvin Harris, Davante Adams, I just don't see there's no way, in my opinion, that he outperforms this ADP. And I say it in every video I make. The best way to win your fantasy drafts is drafting players that will outperform their ADP, not drafting people at their exact ADP. Like, if I think a guy's going to finish at this ADP, maybe it's not a bad pick, especially in the early runs, I will say. But you're trying to look for guys that will beat ADP and give you a leg up. So let's talk about Chris Olave, who's the very next pick, 206, wide receiver 11. I think we all know this one. Don't got to dig too deep. He hasn't finished as a top 30 wide receiver in his first 2 years. So obviously we can all expect a jump with Kirk Cousins, which is why he's gone up to wide receiver 11 in ADP. The thing is, he has to take this ginormous-ass leap for this to pay off. And, 100% he could. I draft a little bit of Drake London because he could do it. But, man, there is so much risk baked into this ADP. The 18th overall pick of fantasy football drafts is a guy that hasn't finished as a top 30 wide receiver, and we're all just expecting, you know what, he's going to become a wide receiver 1 top 12 with this quarterback, easy. That is risky. There is a lot of bust potential with Drake London if he doesn't take that leap. I expect him to take a leap. This is a fucking huge leap, though. So that's the downside for London. I mean, he scored 2 touchdowns last season. Now I know Kirk Cousins, he'll throw more touchdowns than 2 to Drake London, ideally. Hopefully Pitts as well. Raheem Morris is there, not Arthur Smith. But I don't know. I do think that there is a chance that, there's Bijan, there's Drake London, there's Kyle Pitts. There's a chance that one of these guys doesn't get all this new hype and all this new work and take the big leap. They're all baked into, Bijan's going as a top 3 running back. Pitts is going as a top 6 tight ends, and Drake London's going as a top 12 receiver. None of them have finished even close to those ADPs. So they're all supposed to take a jump. I just think it's possible one of them doesn't. They've been gassing Bijan up like crazy. Maybe it's Bijan and Pitts, and London's out here with a wide receiver 24 finish, and it's like, what were we doing? Downside. I've turned this video into just talking about downside because these guys are all just gross to me. Next guy, Chris Olave. I will have a little bit of positivity here because if I need to go receiver in this round, it's usually Olave. Now the downside, wide receiver 16 last season and wide receiver 20 in points per game, and he now goes as a wide receiver 12 at the 207. All that's really changed is no Michael Thomas, so less target competition, and a new offensive coordinator in Clint Kubiak, which in my opinion, that is the positive that I see because they're finally getting out of this old-fashioned, shitty, stupid offense that doesn't work whatsoever with Pete Carmichael that they had for years. And another positive. So Chris Olave still had over 2 yards per route run, which is not as good as his rookie season, but it's still good. The only players that had more 85-plus receiving yard games were Amon-Ra, Tyreek, CeeDee, A.J. Brown, and Amari Cooper than Chris Olave. But my thing, nobody wants to talk about Derek Carr had an AC joint injury. Of course, Olave suffered injuries himself, but the 2 games after after Derek Carr sprained his AC joint and then decided to play anyway, Chris Olave had 1 catch for 4 yards and 2 catches for 12 yards and a touchdown. Olave missed a game and a half himself with a concussion and an ankle injury, but in games that Olave and Carr were both healthy, he averaged 9 targets, 6 catches, 79 yards, 0.28 touchdowns, which is on pace for 1,300 yards and 5 touchdowns. I don't know. I'm sure you guys have all seen the Olave and CD graphic, which I can try to pop up here. Olave's first 2 seasons stats are identical to CD Lamb's. I don't think he's taking a CD Lamb type jump, but I will say that the downside is, Derek Carr, he's not a very good quarterback. Chris Olave, once again, he's being drafted at his ceiling. I'll say that too. I mean, I could see him have maybe a top 8, top 10 finish if he absolutely hit his ceiling. But for the most part, he plays like he did last year, and he's not going to return this value. I just do enjoy the fact that he doesn't have much target competition. The wide receiver 2 is Rashid Shaheed, or I guess Alvin Kamara. Carr hopefully will be a little bit better when healthy, and I have a little faith in the play calling and positive touchdown regression with Olave, but it's still not a pick I get excited about whatsoever. So 2 more guys on this list. Sam LaPorta. This is a wild ADP for me. This is absolutely gross. He was not even the tight end 1 in points per game last year. He was tight end 3, I want to say off the top of my head, behind Kelsey and Andrews. Or no, Kelsey and Hawkinson. It's one of those 2. I'm pretty sure it's Hawkinson, actually. Now, I have in my draft guide, which if you want to check out, just click the link in my bio or hit me with a comment and I'll send you the info. LaPorta goes, 6 to 8 picks ahead of Kelsey, but those 2 both go 2 rounds ahead of Mark Andrews, Trey McBride, and Dalton Kincaid, who I think legitimately these guys are all on the same tier in my opinion. I don't know why you would want to waste a 2nd round pick on a tight end of that caliber when you can get one in the 4th or 5th round. And honestly, tight end is as deep as it's ever been. So if you want to wait a couple more rounds after that, and you got George Kittle, Kyle Pitts, who's expected to take a leap, Evan Engram, who's the tight end 2 last year. Kittle's been top 5 the past few seasons. And, that's what I would recommend, trying to snag one of those guys in those range. But if it comes down to it and you just got to punt the tight end position, I don't mind having Jake Ferguson, David Njoku, even Goddard and Freiermuth, I think would be streamable. Maybe you can pick up another tight end, but I don't know. This is gross. He was literally 7th in receiving yards per game among tight ends. Behind all the elite tight ends that you can think of off the top of your head, they all had more receiving yards per game. The reason that LaPorta was the tight end 1 is because he had 10 touchdowns. Now, I would, if I had to put all my life savings on over or more or less than that amount of touchdowns, I'm 100% going less. Touchdowns are crazy. Kittle had 10 in 2022 and then 5 last season. LaPorta is not the number 1 option in his offense. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jahmyr Gibbs is up there as well. I just think the path to tight end 1 for LaPorta, it's not as clear as some other guys. He wasn't this far ahead of them last year. There was 7 different tight ends that averaged 12 points per game last season. I'm talking about how deep this position is. This is just a waste of a pick to me. What is this? Let me do the math in my head. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. This is the 20th pick overall. There were 25 running backs / receivers that finished ahead of him last year, and he's going 20th overall. Legitimately has to score double-digit touchdowns again to not be a gross pick, and probably has to lead tight ends in both catches, yards, touchdowns by a large margin, to be worth drafting him multiple rounds ahead of these other tight ends. Like, I don't get it. Last guy, Brandon Aiyuk, being drafted as the wide receiver 13. We saw Aiyuk break out last season. He had an unreal efficiency metric, like everywhere. So much that it's pretty unsustainable. 18 yards per reception is unreal. That was second in the NFL. Yards per target, second in the NFL with 12.8. Yards per route run, third in the NFL, 3.18. EPA, second in the NFL. QB rating per target, fourth in the NFL. Fantasy points per target, fourth in the NFL. Fantasy points per route run, fifth in the NFL. It's unsustainable, especially with how many weapons there are in this offense. But if I can find... Nope, I can't find it. All right, I must have exited out. Anyway, Aiyuk finished as the wide receiver 14 last year in this breakout season of him having 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns, which is 300 plus more yards than his previous career best out of 4 seasons. 3 seasons? Once again, I just X'd out of his game log, but he's going as the wide receiver 13 right now. Better than his breakout season last year, which in my opinion is unsustainable, especially when you have CMC to feed, Deebo Samuel, who missed half the season. If he doesn't miss, no, it wasn't half the season, but if he doesn't miss as much time as he did, you're feeding him more. Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle. They drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round. I mean, all they did was add more guys to target. Like, I just don't like he was 36th in yards or in targets of anyone in the NFL, like not even top 30. There's just not enough target volume in this offense. If he gets the same amount of targets as he did last year, I just don't see the efficiency being the same. So I think he could be a bust, straight up. There's a lot of negative to it. Now, obviously, he could just repeat last season and end up finishing at this ADP, but like I said, you kind of want to draft guys that are going to beat their ADP. So this is the best he could possibly do right here. I think it's a lot more likely that he doesn't do this again. I'm a lot happier going with Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Travis Etienne, Kyren Williams, or Davante Adams in this round. Taylor, I think, could lead the league in rushing. Saquon, best O-line of his career. I don't really know what the touchdowns or targets will look like, but I'm not worried about him at all. Travis Etienne, one of the safest picks I think there is, 1,400 yards in the last 2 seasons, each of the last 2 seasons. Now, Kyren and Achane are obviously the risky ones. I like Achane, not the biggest on Kyren, but with that being said, they both have top 5 potential. I just like... If I can avoid these disgusting wide receivers that are all honestly on the same exact tier as the next round, in my opinion, as in Mike Evans, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, I don't know. I'm blanking. I don't know, man. This is just a disgusting round this season. I would try to target running backs or... Like I said, I've leaned into London and Olave a little bit, but make sure you leave a little like and a subscribe. I'm gonna be doing some more videos like this. Comment what you guys want me to do next. Thank you.